Hello, my name is Rinon and welcome to my guide for the first Hephaestus encounter in the 8th Circle of Pandemonium Savage. This door boss combines short-term memory mechanics and intense pacing with a tight DPS check, and it's incredibly fun. This guide should give you all of the information you need to progress and clear the encounter, and I believe these strategies are totally party finder friendly. Let's get into it. The boss will open the encounter with Genesis of Flame, which is a heavy raid damage. After this, watch his cast path for either Conceptual Tetraflare or Conceptual Octaflare. Remember which one casts, as the boss is stocking a mechanic for later in the encounter. Tetraflare is going to be 4 stacks of 2 players, and Octaflare will be a spread mechanic with each player being hit by a small circle AoE. For the pairs, I would place them on the intercardinals of the edge of the boss's hitbox, with tanks being northwest and northeast with a ranged player each, and pairs of healers and melee taking southeast and southwest. You can use these positions a lot throughout the fight. Next is Volcanic Torches. You've seen this mechanic in normal mode, but it's definitely amped up a little bit for Savage. Flaming lines will spawn and begin to fill the arena, and when they are done, they'll detonate, rendering 3/4 of the arena a death zone. This mechanic is actually fairly easy to deal with. With your 2-man parties that you've already established, you split the arena into quadrants. Each pair gets 4 tiles in total to look at. Watch the tiles and go to the one that doesn't get all of its outer edges covered in the moving fire lines. I'm going to show you a few examples to give you an idea of how easily you can tell where to go, and I'm going to tell you which the safe spot is for each of them. Within a few pulls you're going to get used to it, and it's really easy to distinguish. After you dodge these, you will then need to do your pairs or your spreads alongside either a snake or a phoenix from the boss. Snake is a line AoE through the boss's hitbox. Phoenix is 2 line AoEs on the sides of the room, rendering the center of the boss's hitbox safe. You can use the black lines on the floor for reference for these hits every time they happen throughout the entire encounter. Flame Viper is a double tank swap. One tank will take a buster as the second provokes, then the second tank will take a buster as the original provokes once again. I would not recommend using invulnerabilities on this buster. If you want to find out why, you can try it yourself. I can explain in more detail in the comment section though. When the boss casts Reforged Reflection, watch his arms. If you see it begin to turn into a giant snake, go outside of the hitbox. If you see his legs and body begin to grow and mutate, stand inside the hitbox on an intercardinal and use Shorecast or Arm's Length. In case you're too late on this, make sure you get knocked into a corner, not an edge. Depending on the transformation, you're going to get 2 different phases, which I will run through now. After the knockback, he turns into beast form. You want to set the party up in a rough protean wave spread at the edge of the boss's hitbox, with the healers a little further inside like this, so they can easily propagate heals. The boss will stomp 4 times for 4 heavy raid damages, but with each stomp, 2 players will receive an earth resistance down debuff. With each hit, count in your head and pay attention to whether you are first, second, third, or fourth to receive the debuff. After this, everyone except the first 2 players hit move directly underneath the hitbox, with the first 2 players moving north just outside of the line of the inner squares. They will shortly be jumped on by the boss for large damage. While this is happening, the second set of players will move to south in the exact same location. As soon as the first players have been hit, the third players can move north to replace their spots, and the first players can move back into the center. And lastly, as the second players get hit, the fourth can move south into their position, and the second can move back to middle. This is going to resolve the mechanic easily, with no uptime loss for any player. There is no need to have the boss jumping across the room. Before we continue, I'm going to explain the other permutation, which my group calls Snake Form. After you've moved outside the hitbox, you will receive either a Blood of the Gorgon buff or an Eye of the Gorgon buff alongside a 1 or 2 icon. The boss will then shoot Gorgons into the ground 2x2, which will then rotate around the arena before jumping out and shooting a look away mechanic from themselves. You need to hit the Gorgons with the Eye of the Gorgons to petrify them, and then hit them with the blood of the Gorgons to insta-kill them. Then, the number 2 group is going to need to do the same thing after the number 1 group has resolved their job. The way I recommend dealing with this mechanic is assigning a clockwise group for supports and for DPS, and a counterclockwise group for supports and for DPS. For example, tanks and ranged go anti-clockwise, healers and melee go clockwise. Within each of these pairs, you then assign one person to flex if needed. You watch your debuff, and say for example you are number 1 eye. The only thing you need to do is check the other player in the pair, so for example in my case the other healer. If you both have different debuffs, you do your assigned clockwise or anti-clockwise as normal. If both players in the pair have the same debuff, say both players have 1 eye, then the assigned flex player will swap to the other direction to resolve the mechanic. So for example, I will then go anti-clockwise. You're going to watch the eyes rotating around the arena and look roughly north. And as soon as they're about to start coming out of the ground, dodge the gaze, lock in which Gorgon you're going to be petrifying or splashing with poison, and then resolve your mechanic. This sounds fairly complex, but in execution it's actually quite simple. The step-by-steps are as follows. Check your buff and the buff of the other person in your pair. Determine whether you are clockwise or counterclockwise. Watch the Gorgons and dodge the look away mechanic. If you're the first set, do your gaze or splash. If you are gaze, make sure you're on the edge of the hitbox to not risk hitting other players. Look away from the second set of Gorgons. If you are second set, do your gaze or splash. This is all followed up by a large raid damage. After the boss has finished one of these patterns, he will cast Illusory Creation. 4 clones will spawn on the cardinal edges of the arena. As he casts Creation on command, watch the clones as one will spawn a serpent and the other a phoenix. Find the phoenix and spread within the safe area that it's going to leave. 4 players, either tanks and healers or DPS, will be hit by a circle AoE, which gives you a vulnerability. These 4 players should then stand on the edge of the boss's hitbox on their closest cardinal. The 4 players that were not hit will move inside the boss's hitbox at the intercardinal they assigned earlier in the fight in their pairs, and they will make sure that they're moving much deeper inside the boss's hitbox than the group who had been hit. This will bait the 4 Nest of Flame Vipers line AoEs that hit the 4 closest players. Now that all 8 players have been hit, the other 2 Hephaestus clones will spawn either 2 serpents or 2 phoenixes, rendering either a square in the centre of the room safe or the 4 corners safe. This will then be combined with either Tetraflare or Nest of Flame Vipers, so players will need to either spread or stack in pairs inside the hitbox or in their 4 assigned corners. Following this, more torches will spawn on the north and east side of the room and will immediately spread to the south and west side of the room. Watch them spread and determine which direction they turn in. Check this 10,000 hours in MS Paint image here. If they shift away from each other once they hit south and west, the southwest is safe. If they go towards each other, the northeast is safe. If they both go in the same direction, you go whichever of the northwest or southeast corner they are facing away from. This is all followed by more raid damage. Then, the second of either the snake or beast form will happen, and once you have completed, the boss will once again stock either Tetraflare or Octaflare, which you will then need to remember. Following this, the boss will cast Fourfold Fires, stand directly in the middle of the arena and mitigate this large hit, and then get the raid topped up as soon as possible afterwards. For this mechanic, assign 4-player light parties and give each of them a clockwise and the other a counterclockwise priority. You're going to use this priority to resolve all of the individual movements in this phase, and it should make the entire thing exceptionally intuitive. 2 of the 4 fire puddles in the corners will begin spewing flame. Whenever this happens, it means that soon a fire serpent will leap out of it, causing that quarter of the room to spawn a large circular AoE. You want to move away to the 2 corners with no spewing flames first of all. Watch the 2 puddles the serpents jump back into and execute your clockwise and anti-clockwise priority from north, and move into the new safe spots with the rest of your light party. A Tetraflare or Octaflare cast will happen alongside this, so stack in pairs or spread, and the serpents will once again jump. Find your new safe spots and position as the boss summons either a phoenix or a serpent on themselves. Once the fire puddles explode, do the in or out of the bird snake, and remember the conceptual tetraflare or octaflare from the start of this mechanic. This is going to resolve at the same time as bird and snake, so it's essentially going to be in or out with pairs or spread. This is all followed up with another Flame Viper on the tanks. The boss will then begin a second set of Reforged reflections, and the order will depend on the order in which you first saw mechanics on this pull. If you saw Gorgons first, you will see the second Gorgon mechanic first in the next set, and vice versa. You can never get 2 Gorgons back to back, and you can never get 2 Beasts back to back. Once again, I'll explain the new Beast and Gorgon forms, but please bear in mind they may happen in the opposite order than what I've explained, so you need to be ready for them. Beast form once again starts with the same knockback as before, so surecast or arm's length as necessary. The boss will then jump, with the cast bar of either quadrupedal Crush or Impact. If it's Crush, run away from where he's jumping. If it's Impact, follow and prepare to be knocked across the arena. You are now going to have to play a short memory game. The boss will either cast Conceptual Die Flare or Tetraflare. Die Flare is going to be light party stacks, one on the boss and one a little further away. Tetraflare is once again the pairs you are used to doing, in a line going from the boss. During the cast of Blazing Footfalls, the boss will do 2 knockbacks from the center and 2 leaps in order of knockback from center, then leap, then knockback from center, then leap. You're going to need to remember all 4 as they are shown to you and then perform them one by one after another with no telegraphs. After the first knockback, the stocked conceptual mechanic will execute, and after the final leap, you will need to run to the safe column from the torches. It's tremendously easy to find the safe column. It's literally the same mechanic as in normal mode. I really recommend using markers similar to ours, as they make memorization for this mechanic much easier in my opinion, because you have numbers and letters to reference. This is all followed with a Flame Viper Tank Buster. For the second Gorgon phase, the transformation will once again be accompanied by a circle AoE, so move outside of the boss's hitbox. Every player will receive a Blood of the Gorgon buff and an Eye of the Gorgon buff, but they will have 2 different timers. One will be 28 seconds and the other 22 seconds. DPS and support players will once again split into their arena quadrants as pairs to resolve this mechanic. There are 2 new debuffs as well, which I'll explain a little later. 4 Gorgons will dive under the ground at the same time, and they will all pop up with a look away mechanic at the same time on either the intercardinals or on the cardinals of the arena. Dodge this, and then the player on each pair which has the shorter eye debuff will stand directly in front of the Gorgon to petrify it. The player in the pair with the shorter blood buff will stand in the other spot. Once the gaze and blood have both popped, the 2 players will then swap places, with the second eye buff extending the petrify on the Gorgon. You want to make sure you do not hit any of the Gorgons or any other players with the blood buffs when they expire. Once all 4 Gorgons have extended petrifies and all 8 blood buffs have been safely dropped, look at the additional debuffs. 2 players will have Cursed Shriek, and 2 players will have a purple coloured blood debuff. Remember your clockwise and counterclockwise movement priorities from the previous Gorgon mechanic? You will use those once again, alongside the fixed flex player that you discussed before to resolve this mechanic easily. The boss will spawn a clone, which will dash through one side of the arena and destroy 2 of the Gorgons, leaving 2 remaining. The Cursed Shriek players will need to find their closest Gorgon using the aforementioned clockwise and anti-clockwise priority, and stand on the outside of it, as in the side nearer to the edge of the arena. The 2 purple blood buff players will need to do the same thing, but on the inside of their respective Gorgon. The rest of the players will join the 2 blood buff players, following their own clockwise and counterclockwise priorities in their spots, and stack with them. The shrieks will go out, be blocked by the 2 Gorgons, and the bloods will explode for stack damages on the players, and the mechanic will be successfully resolved. One thing I'd like to note is that the players with Cursed Shriek can actually be inside those stacks by making sure that they are very close to the Gorgons on the outside. The splash damage from the blood will go through the Gorgon, and it will be nice, safe 4-man stacks that require less healing and mitigation than the slightly scarier 3-man stacks. Finally, the boss will cast a raid wide and then enrage after a few auto attacks. The DPS check is quite tight, especially week 1, so I would recommend making smart use of the melee LB outside of raid buffs to ensure that you can meet the check. Hephaestus needs to be pushed to 49.9% by the enrage in order to proceed to the next and final encounter of the tier. Thank you very much for watching, friends. I really appreciate it. I'm going to have guides out for the rest of the encounters in this raid tier very soon. I wish you the best of luck with progging this fight, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to leave a comment and I'd be more than happy to do my best to answer them. Have a fantastic rest of your day.